Hello, Staten Islanders. My name is Luke Nasta. I am the executive director of Camelot of Staten Island. With me today are two Camelot staff members. To my left is Susan Bernstein. Susan is the director of our residential program at 273 Hepperton Avenue in the Port Richmond section of Staten Island. And to my right is Dominick Matarrese, who is the residential director for our program on the grounds of the Seaview Hospital campus. I hope we're able to shed some light and give some encouragement about this terrible epidemic that we're having on Staten Island, the opioid epidemic, which started with prescription drugs and now has become a heroin epidemic that's causing multiple hundreds of deaths and multiple hundreds of deaths of overdoses each year that don't all necessarily wind up as a fatality. So Staten Island CTV has asked us, since this is such a critical topic, that we make an attempt at reaching out to Staten Islanders to give them information about the drug problem and make some suggestions on what can be done to address it, both in individual families and in our community in general. So that's our hope today. If there's an interest, we'll continue to do this. If it's just a one-show opportunity, I thought the most important thing for us to talk about today would be families, the families on Staten Island who are basically held hostage by an active addict in their family, families who are paralyzed and don't know what steps to take, their instinct being to protect their loved one, and often that translates into perpetuating the problem, or more commonly known as enabling the problem. And so we'd like to shed some light on just what that means and what steps that people should feel confident in taking, even though it might be against their intuition or their instinct, because this disease is not like other diseases. Other diseases, when a family member is affected, you nurture them, you bring them close, you support them. This disease, you need to battle with. You need to fight with it. And it's very difficult to do. It's sort of the cliche, it's easy for me to say and hard for you to do. But if you really want to, and I know you really want to, get control over this epidemic that's affecting a family member, you have to do the difficult things. You have to make the right decisions at the right time, even though you're struggling with what that action might be. Just a little bit about Camelot. It was founded in 1971 by the North Shore Kiwanis Charitable Foundation. It continues to be supported by Kiwanis. They are now the North Central Kiwanis, and they continue to make contributions to Camelot and support Camelot in many different ways. This happened they established Camelot in 1971 because of the heroin epidemic that hit Staten Island and sort of left the poverty pockets and knew no boundaries on Staten Island. Recently, some of my staff had forwarded me Staten Island Advance articles from 1970, headlines talking about overdose deaths in the early 70s, 70, 71. A father's struggle with his two sons who were addicts and steps that he'd taken, a mother, and so we are revisiting it now, but 10 times greater than that problem of the 1960s and 70s. That problem was never really resolved. People who were addicted got HIV/AIDS, overdosed, turned to crime, and were on very powerful medications that halted their heroin abuse, but didn't cure the underlying emotional problems. And really that group, while it may have appeared that we solved the problem then, we really basically lost that generation. The following generation didn't follow suit, luckily. But here we are in 2018, after 25 years of prescription opioids being made readily available, that has caused the prescription drug epidemic, which has led to the heroin epidemic. The prescription drugs were all opiates, such as OxyContin, oxycodone, Percocet, Vicodin, codeine. All of them are opiates. They're synthetic opiates. They're manufactured in this country. They come from a prescription written by a doctor and are purchased at a pharmacy. But they are heroin. They're just not called heroin because they're synthetic and manufactured right here in the United States. And so people who are using them for legitimate reasons, such as a sports injury or an operation or dental work, or many reasons why people physically needed a pain management drug, really unwittingly became addicted and dependent upon opiates. Key to solving this problem, besides collaboration by all aspects of our society, government, organized religion, the media, education, public education, from elementary school through junior high school, college, and including graduate school, and the professions such as legal professions and certainly the medical profession, which needs to be well informed and educated on the dangers of the drugs that they're prescribing, which in the past they haven't been, and they unwittingly contributed to this problem. But I'm not here to talk about beating up the medical profession or anyone else, but collaboration will be the cure if all the different disciplines, law enforcement, health, social work, if we all work in combination in a real integrated way and share, not just share with each other the things that we're doing to combat and address this epidemic, but be accountable to each other as to what we're doing and what we're doing differently. Because doing the same thing hasn't worked. We need to approach this differently and include all the different types of methods on working with people who are active addicts. But we want to talk about our family services, our family association, and what we do there. So I'm going to start by asking Susan, what can people expect when they become involved with the family association? And let me start by saying, so that people realize that the services that we provide to our family association are free. They're no cost. It doesn't require insurance. It's not a cash payment. It's a public service that Camelot offers. We are funded to work with the with the client who has the problem. We are either not funded or inadequately funded to work with the Family Association. And we want to encourage people to come in, so we don't want financial barriers to keep people from coming in and get the necessary information and support and guidance that they'll require to deal with this, horrendous scourge.
Yes.
So what can a person expect?
So good morning, Luke. Good morning, Dominic. Once again, yes, we are free to the public. The public is invited to come. What they're going to find when they walk through the doors is a safe space, an intimate setting, an abundance of information, education, and no judgment. So they're able to vent everything they're going through, and everybody in that room has gone through the same thing or is going through it as well. I can tell you that I have 2 women that have been coming for 3 years to Family Association, even though their sons have long completed the program. They like to joke that it's free therapy. So,
have their sons successfully completed the program?
They did.
And their sons are healthy, living healthy lives?
They're living in Florida. There's some bumps in the road, and so they keep coming.
Good.
The benefit to both parties is that we serve as the mediator. We serve as the gateway to rebuilding a relationship that was so long probably damaged.
It would be, and the ways that those relationships get damaged are not visible to the general public.
Exactly.
Even though we have an epidemic and thousands of people who are dependent upon opiates and don't have legitimate means of supporting those habits, the crime statistics do not indicate that. And that's because the crimes are against families.
Yes.
The checkbook, the credit card, the jewelry, people having to lock their bedroom doors, appliances, anything that can generate money for the addiction.
Yes.
And herein is the example of how families are paralyzed and not knowing what to do. Because those are actual crimes. Even though they're being committed against family members, they're actual crimes. And what we will recommend is that family prosecute. And the reaction is, just as you would expect, how can I do that to my loved one? How can I do that to my child? How can I do that to the father of my children? How will this affect their employment opportunities in the future? And herein is the example of where you must make that tough decision to coerce the person into treatment. Now, coercion doesn't guarantee a successful treatment, but it does introduce the person to treatment. And addicts are resistant because they're afraid. They're resistant to treatment because the nature of their addiction is it's a characteristic of their addiction to be resistant to help. Plus, they can't conceive of life without being on a drug. And they're really incompetent. They're actually incompetent to make healthy choices for themselves. So when it reaches the stage or the level where the crimes are public crimes, that the public safety is been jeopardized, then the legal system steps in, and often when the problem, if it's nonviolent, the crime, if it's nonviolent, and it's recognized that that person is an addict, they'll be given a choice, an alternative to incarceration, and this will introduce people into treatment. But before that, And the majority of Staten Islanders who have a family member who are addicted today don't fall into that category where they're committing crimes against the public. It's crimes against the family. So we want the family to take steps, and there's a number of steps. It doesn't have to be just an arrest, but there are a number of steps that can be taken in each family once family members come to us. And we're able to talk to them about where they have the leverage over this person to move them toward treatment.
You also have to remember that, especially in my building at Heberton, where it's young males, these gentlemen have no children, they have no wives. They're going back. They're going back to the same parents that don't trust them, that are afraid of them, that are in emotional turmoil. So once again, what we do is we teach them to recognize triggers, to recognize their patterns. They know their child better than we ever will. So recognize when they come home when something's wrong, and trust them when you see they're doing good.
Yeah. What are some of the signs that they could look for?
That they're falling back into negative patterns.
Yeah.
Sleeping too much, not sleeping at all. Eyes don't look right. They're not eating. They have no appetite. They're hanging out with the same people they left behind. They're leaving work. They're not going to work. They're not going to school. There's always an excuse.
Yeah.
So once again, we teach the parents and the loved ones to recognize the pattern of when your loved one is falling behind again.
When a family does show up for the first time, as you pointed out earlier, you could see they're lost. They're beat up. They don't know what to do. Their son or daughter or significant other is in a place where they don't know how to bring them back. And from that first meeting with the Family Association to the 5th or 6th meeting, you see the family member has a whole different perspective. You can see there's some hope. They can see they have support. They're being educated. And they are making decisions now that are in the best interest of not only their family member, but themselves. And it's almost like a family environment is produced through that. And as Susan was pointing out, how family members are still coming back 3-4 years later, the same thing is happening at the Family Association on Staten Island, the one that I coordinate on Fridays. Susan does the one on Tuesdays in Jamaica, Queens. Even if their children have made positive moves and have continued sobriety and abstinence, they've learned so much by being part of these groups that they feel it's important that they continue doing it. It's almost like a diabetic checking their sugar every day. This is their support. They've developed a friendship and love, and it's you could see the difference in the family members from beginning to to now.
I think one of the most important things that we accomplish at Camelot with our family services is we teach all those things that Susan pointed out, the signs, and we also teach the appropriate actions to be taken. And that when they're finished with Camelot, when they no longer come back to our family association, they actually take the lessons learned in Camelot with them. They sort of take the program with them. Absolutely. So that they know in the future that what signs to look for.
And the substance use individual is well aware of the fact now that their family members know their triggers, know their tendencies, know their behaviors.
Right.
So it makes it easier for the family member and easier for the client to say, I have to be careful what I'm doing here. My family has a plan of action now. Right. And that's very, very important.
And it's one of the I'll get to you in a second,
No,
Susan.
that's fine.
That's one of the reasons why clients resist having their family members be part of the program, because they don't want to be so exposed.
Yep, absolutely.
Susan?
No, I was going to say that's usually the case. When they first come into treatment, they don't want their families to know what their toxicology results are, how they're acting in the program. But then after a while, they see the good that we're doing, that we're serving as that gatekeeper to repair that relationship, that if we weren't there to play mediator, probably wouldn't happen because mom is not going to trust the son just because he says so.
Yeah. It's such a complex problem.
Yes.
It's so difficult to really gain control over it, to master it. There's so many things, elements working against stability and rehabilitation. I mean, we take people into our programs that have been actively dependent on drug misuse for a decade or more. And when they're in with us, they stabilize.
Yes.
They're not using anymore. They are sleeping right. They're eating right. They're education. They're getting education, formal education. They're thinking about their future and vocation. They're repairing their relationship with families. But then they go back into society. And society is do as I say, not as I do. It's a society that is a culture of get high and avoid discomfort. And when they go to school or training, vocational training, or an actual job, they find that their coworkers are active users, maybe not addicts, maybe recreational users, certainly smoking pot, using recreational marijuana, which is gradually becoming an acceptable behavior in our society, which I think is it's not a slippery slope, it's a nosedive for us. So where they've been on the perimeter of society because of their addiction when they came to us and get healthy or thinking positive, want to be productive, they go back out into the society where for them to stay, for them not to relapse, they kind of have to be back on the perimeter of society because the mainstream society is drugging and drinking and being irresponsible and hurting themselves and not realizing that the damage that's being done.
Before we run out of time, just to let everybody know that Family Association meetings on Tuesday evenings in Jamaica, Queens, at what time, Susan?
7 o'clock.
7
p.m.
Right, and the Seaview residents, where I'm located, the meetings are on Friday evenings from 7 to 8:30. And as Luke pointed out, there's no cost. You don't have to have a family member that's in treatment with us.
Good point.
It is open to the public. A large percentage of our family members have no involvement with any family members at Camelot, so it is open to the public. And I promise you, if you come once, you're more than likely going to be coming back again and again because you'll see how it really gives you some support, some structure, some hope.
It's. I'm glad you brought up that point. That we can actually impact. We can actually influence the individual who is the active user just by working with the family.
Yep.
Even if we don't have that person in treatment, or if that person is in treatment somewhere else, we can work with that family and have a positive impact on their family member without them being in treatment with us. It's just such a valuable service.
And many times, the staff member doesn't have to say anything. Just the family members alone,
Carry
their
the group.
experiences
Yes.
and them sharing them stories and in letting those new people know what they need to do is sometimes more relevant and more helpful than staff talking, because they see that it's family members
Right.
that are explaining
so
their
true.
stories, and they can relate. Like it's almost like it sounds like my son. It sounds
Yeah.
like my daughter.
Right.
Yeah.
It eliminates, not entirely, but it certainly lessens the embarrassment that's associated with having a family member who's an active addict. Once you're with other family members who are basically the same as you, you're coming from productive families, working families, conscientious parents who are frozen with fear that others will find out, that other family members will find out. And when they're in our support group, that lessens and it makes them feel free to open up about what they're going through. They compare it to other individuals.
I just wanted to say, Luke, I'm sorry. I wanted
right
to
ahead.
point out why we have two Family A meetings. So we have the one which Dominic runs on the grounds of Seaview every Friday night at 7, am I correct? And then we decided to make another one off the island because a lot of the residents and their families live in the 5 boroughs. We have residents from the Bronx, from Brooklyn, from Queens, from Long Island. So we made a second Family A so everybody could get to
Yeah.
a place.
And to understand the characteristics is important for family members to realize this, and community members of Staten Island to realize this, that, well, if we have such a serious problem on Staten Island, then why isn't our program filled with Staten Islanders with a waiting list? And it's because of the stigma associated with the problem, the embarrassment associated with the problem, and the belief that if you move the person geographically away from where they're a user, that will be the cure. And that's not necessarily so. If they're coming back to live in this community, then they should get their help in this community and be prepared to go back out into this community once they've stabilized, gotten control of themselves, and are ready and healthy and willing to go back into the community. That they've done it while living in that community. And I hope we've been helpful to the families on Staten Island. In a short period of time, we haven't been able to cover all aspects of it in great detail, but I can tell you that there's help. There's help. We're willing and able to provide not just Camelot, the YMCA Counseling Services, Community Health Action Center. There are a dozen or more places on Staten Island where you can go and get help. But certainly the Camelot Family Association is open to you. Please call us, 718-356-5100, 718-356-5100.